Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 5 of Create an Impact. I got an amazing guest on today, Johnny Elsasser. He is the host of the Art of Masculinity podcast. I'm so looking forward to having you on today, man. You've been a huge inspiration to me, covering masculinity issues and topics and, teaching males to embrace their masculinity and putting it out there more. And he's a former U.S. combat veteran serving in Afghanistan and Iraq in 4 combat tours. And tell me a little bit about where your journey got started today and where it all started at a young age.
Yeah, brother. Well, I'm really happy to be on here with you. Thank you for the invite to come on. I'm excited to be at the beginning of your show, so that's really cool that you just started this nice and fresh.
Right.
So I appreciate you, man. Ultimately, I had a uncle who's my godfather, and he got me really involved into just kind of respecting myself, honoring myself as a man, but then also protecting others. So I was getting out of high school. I was a big soccer player in high school and did not take any tests, bro.
Right.
Didn't take any tests. No one told me, okay, this is what you got to do to get into college. So I was like, oh shit, everybody else is going to college. What am I supposed to do right now? So I had a buddy come up to me and he's like, hey brother, you ever hear of like special forces and Army Rangers and stuff? And I was like, I mean, like movies, I heard of special forces, sure. And he's like, check this stuff out. So he shows me like Navy SEALs, he shows me special forces, and this is a good friend of mine, and shows me all this stuff. And I was like, oh, these Army Ranger guys sound really cool.
Right.
So fast forwarding, I signed up at 17 years old. Parents had to emancipate me to get into the military, and I get in there and signed up, and I actually tried to get Rangers to start off right off the bat, get in my contract. And here I am, just a 17-year-old kid after going through the medical and processing, and the recruiter at the end's like, he's like, hey man, you can just get Rangers when you get in. I was like, okay, I'll just listen to you, take your word for it. Well, that's really not the case.
Right.
He just wanted me to fill the needs of the Army because we were in wartime. This was after 9/11.
Right.
So, and this was about 2004. So I was like, fine, man, I'll just go and do it. So I get in there and, just this young kid, and I get into basic training, and all of a sudden, I'm just knocking out the PT test. I'm a fast runner. I played soccer. I was running like 2 miles in like 11 minutes, 30 seconds. I was maxing out all my PT tests, and my drill sergeant comes to me and he's like, hey, Elsasser, you want to, what do you want? You want special forces? You want Rangers? What do you want? And I was like, hey, drill sergeant, I want Rangers. That'd be awesome. Comes back the next day with a contract, man. So signed a contract, went to airborne school, and off I was going to Ranger Indoctrination program where they just basically beat the crap out of you, and then went over to second bat, and then from there the rest is history. Did 3 combat tours in Iraq and 1 in Afghanistan.
How did that make you feel being over in Iraq and Afghanistan? Like, what was the journey like being over there, like the weather and the people and the whole culture?
I mean, when you're in the military, especially in wartime, you're not really getting indoctrinated into the culture because you're doing missions at times when people aren't really hanging out.
Yeah, right.
So that's kind of the point. But I think the biggest shock to me was really getting over there at 17 or 18 at that time. I got over there in 18, but getting over there still as a kid.
Yeah.
And you're kicking indoors, you're getting in gunfights, you're blowing stuff up. I mean, I'd like to say it was organized. My good buddy Matt Best and we were just joking about this the other day, but I'd like to say it was organized, but it's not.
Right.
I call it really organized chaos is what it is. If it's like you're out there with your hair on fire and you're just making the movements go and you're trained really well, but it's very chaotic, man. And every second is chaotic. And if you thought really about what you were doing, you'd never step foot through the door. So it was an interesting dynamic between coming from being just this 17-year-old kid playing soccer to now being overseas fighting a war in Iraq. And it's hot as shit over there, as you can imagine.
Yeah,
and
I bet.
wearing hundreds of pounds of gear between your plates, your ammo, your explosives, your weapon, all that stuff. So it's a lot of work, man. And there's some funny stories about that stuff too. But it's a lot of work. It's a lot of hard work. And at 18 years old, it was definitely a huge culture shock in life.
Right.
Sure.
How has this led into like your masculinity career, like the personal development now that you've gotten out, like getting out of the military? What was that like transitioning to the civilian world again?
So that's kind of oh man, that's like a multi-tiered question. So just really starting from getting out of the military from especially a high level, high octane special operations world. the issue that we have as men is, and my buddies, a lot of my buddies went through the same thing I did, was you lose your identity. You know, you develop this identity around who you were operating at this high level with all these other guys who are at this high level.
Yeah.
You hold yourself at a whole different standard from a normal person because you have to. You get out of the military and you're in this regular civilian life, and everything is just slower paced. Everybody's standards are far, but like, and not trying to disrespect anybody, but the standards are much less than what it is in the special operations world because we didn't have much room for error. So when you start doing that, you're sitting behind a computer and stuff like that. It really changes your identity. And you actually, like what I did was I actually lost who I was for a while, you know, and that brought me to a little bit of depression. It brought me into
Right.
drinking more. That brought me into, just really looking forward to the weekend so I could, be on a phone call with my brother and drink and freaking, hit the barbecue and stuff like that. So I lost who I was in a big way. And what that does is that really just takes a hit on your confidence. It takes a hit on your masculinity. It takes a hit on your personality. And you really start losing kind of what you're even doing in life. You're just kind of like, well, what the fuck's going on?
Right.
So, sorry, you can cuss on here, right?
Yeah, I don't care. It's cool. I'm cool with it. So
I should have asked that one before, but
nah, you're good.
so you lose what's really going on in your life, and you lose like where you're going. And that was a huge shock to me, being somebody that was in such a high level. I was a sergeant at 21 years old.
Yeah.
I was a team leader and a squad leader at 21 years old. I was leading men into war, and all of a sudden here I am not knowing who I was.
Right.
And that was a huge revelation to me as a man and as a person. So from there, I went through a divorce. And nothing bad about her. We just weren't right for each other, and we weren't making a great life together. So we got divorced. And then I moved into kind of finding myself a little bit again after we got divorced. And I met my current wife now, Taylor, who, she's an amazing person. But I was definitely of the alpha mentality of who are these self-development people to tell me what it's like to be a man. Like, where have they been? I've been overseas. I've been fighting for years. I spent another 5 years at protecting the U.S. ambassador to Iraq after I got out of the military. So I spent almost 10 years in the Middle East. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, who are these guys to tell me, And she's like, babe, just listen to them. Like, there's some great information in there. And I was like, fuck this, no way. So lo and behold, she did psychological warfare on me, and she'd throw a podcast on here and there in the background. So I wouldn't I wouldn't be paying attention. I'd be doing the dishes, and I'd be here, and I'd be like, man, that's really good. And I was like, okay, I can kind of get into this. And then she handed me, the first book she handed me was Excuses Be Gone by Dr. Wayne Dyer. And an amazing book. If I can recommend anything to anybody, start with that book because it really helps you to challenge your own self. But she hands that to me and I read it and I fall in love with the book. I fall in love with the message of checking yourself, that everything you're doing that's holding you back in life, you're creating an excuse around. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this self-development stuff's pretty cool.
Right.
So I was like, well, if I'm not doing this, my other buddies are doing the same thing. They're not diving into this because they don't want to listen to somebody that they don't respect the background there.
I agree with that.
So I said to myself, well, if I can take some of the self-development information from guys like Lewis Howes, from guys like, Dr. Wayne Dyer, from, even stuff from like Tony Robbins, and stuff from Josh Trent, and start packaging this in my background to kind of help these guys really get their message out because I just believe in it.
Right.
Maybe we can get that small group of alphas to start looking at me saying, hey, I'll respect this guy and listen to him, but then they're actually going to be able to make their lives better because what happens is there's a lot of toxicity that they bring back from the war. A lot of these guys have, and I know this because all my buddies went through this and I went through this, they have bad relationships with their kids. They have bad relationships with their wives. They have bad relationships with their family and friends back home because they don't relate anymore. They've become somebody who's only associated with war, with alpha males, with the high octane lifestyle. And when they don't have that, they're completely lost.
Right.
So I was like, okay, if I can do anything, I can help these guys be better and help them to find themselves again when they're at home. So that's where my self-development journey really started. I was like, let's start doing the research. I got to start doing the work myself. So that's what I did. I started picking up books. I started reading about masculinity, what there is on
Hmm.
masculinity today, and started reading more self-development stuff, started listening to podcasts. I was listening to a ton of podcasts. I still do
Right.
on a regular basis to try to just soak up the information that I can bring to this alpha community. So
Right.
that's really where I took it from.
Okay. How was your podcast? Because like I love your podcast, dude. Like, where did that like idea get started at first? Like starting your own podcast? Was it just listening to other podcasts and this whole mission you've been on? Tell me a little bit
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, man. So it was a two-pronged approach. My wife really influenced it. She said, "Babe, you have a mission right now. You really enjoy this. Why don't you think about starting a podcast?" And I was very hesitant. And I'll tell you why. I was very hesitant because just like you and just like everybody else,
Yeah.
stepping out and putting yourself in social media, people are going to eventually criticize you.
Yep.
You're terrified of saying something incorrectly because you're like,
Hmm.
man, I don't want to give fake information out there.
Yeah.
You're terrified of just not doing well and sound like an idiot. So these same things went through my head, man. And so
Right.
I'm sitting there and I was like,
Yeah.
well, sweetheart, what happens if that happens? And she's like, babe, you know the stuff. You've done the research. You're working on yourself. It's okay. It's okay if you mess up. Just put it out there. And so I was like, all right, well, let's do it. I said, well, I've been blown up, shot at, and all this other shit.
Right.
Worst thing they can do is talk trash about me, but whatever. So that's where I just kind of jumped into it full force. And if since you've probably listened to the podcast,
Oh yeah, it's been awesome.
the first ones were a little choppy, and I've heard
Yeah.
from buddies they're like, hey man, you're getting so much better. And
See.
the coolest thing was, I think, and one of the biggest motivations is guys like you that have reached out to me, and then a lot of my buddies who I thought would be like, oh dude, this is stupid, whatever it is, are actually super supportive of it, and it's really
Right.
hitting home for them. So I'm actually hitting the group I intended to, and they're
Right.
like, bro, you're doing great. This is awesome. You're sounding really good over the podcast, which means they're actually listening to it. So that's really where it started. And my wife really pushed me into it. And that's where I thought, like, okay, well, I can get this message out there too. I think blogging is a good place, but
Yeah.
it's also tough on blogging, because in today's world, people really just don't have time they make up an excuse that they don't have
Yeah.
time to read.
Yep.
And people's attention span, I think, I heard from David Norrie, is down to about 8 seconds nowadays.
8 seconds. Wow.
Yeah, something like that. So when you're reading, if you're not completely immersed in that, focused on it, then you and don't hurt me if I misquote you there, David Norrie, but about 8 seconds. So when you're reading, and if your attention's not fully indoctrinated in what you're reading, then there's a good chance that you're going to lose attention and you're going to stop reading or not finish the article, right? So, but podcasts, what do people do? They listen to it when they're on the treadmill. They listen to it while they're on a bike. They'll
Right.
listen to it while they're working out, and they'll listen to it in the car while they're driving. So they're able to multitask with podcasts. And so that's why I kind of felt it was going to be more impactful to get involved here than it would be just in blogging.
Right. Yeah, it's very accessible. It's a really underpriced platform, and you can really connect with people in all different areas, like cleaning, cooking, while you're driving your car to work, stuck in traffic, because our lives are like boxes. We eat cereal box, so we go to
Yeah.
work in a box. It's like, and one of the episodes I really enjoyed, you talked about hegemonic masculinity. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so that is actually one. I'm going to do a selfless plug here. In the future, I'm going to get James Messerschmidt on my show, and he's
Okay.
one of the top people in actually studying hegemonic masculinity. Raywin Connell's the top one who started it back in I believe the 70s, if I'm not correct, early
Okay.
80s. And then James Messerschmidt was one of the other ones that worked with her. And hegemonic masculinity is very intriguing to me. Hegemonic masculinity is essentially, it's those masculinity traits that are dominant, but are also they're basically, if I can quote this correctly, they're basically supported by subordinate feminine traits.
Okay.
So what happens is, for instance, if I say that I'm the man and you need to cook and I need to bring home the bacon, right? If I'm telling that to my
Yeah.
wife, okay, if I'm going to bring home the money and you're going to cook, well, she supports that by being subordinate to that masculinity trait. It becomes a hegemonic masculinity trait. And so
Right.
it's those traits that make feminine traits subordinate to them. and it has to have that correlation, or else it just simply becomes like a dominant trait, right? So
Okay.
you have hegemonic masculinity traits. Typically, they're associated with dominating, with power, and with some of the strong traits of, kind of like putting down. I don't really want to say putting down others, but establishing yourself better than others, or in some capacity, right? So
Right.
essentially, that's where hegemonic masculinity comes from,
Okay.
and it's
Yeah,
very fluid too.
it is. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like I've dealt with a lot of masculinity issues throughout my life, just through alcoholism. That was a big thing growing up, and I got bullied a lot. So I
Mhm.
always was afraid of, trying to join the football team and, trying to put myself out there. And I learned as I got older, I took my circumstances and my issues and turned that into my purpose. And it really grew my masculinity and really not being afraid to share my feelings as a male.
Mm.
And I wanted to touch a little bit about that because, you've been putting this awareness out there and really supporting males and not being afraid to, become who you are. Don't be afraid. Like,
Yeah.
love yourself. That is the most important thing. And just wanted to a little talk about that.
Yeah, brother. In my opinion, it is. So I get a little kind of I get a little wrapped up when it comes to people saying that you gotta lift weights and you gotta hunt and you gotta fight and you gotta shoot guns, and
Right.
I've done all that stuff. That doesn't make you a fucking man. I'm sorry to tell you,
Right.
it doesn't.
Yeah.
I've done all that stuff, and I can do it now, and I can go out and do a lot of these things. But I don't feel it makes you a man. And what about the men who don't like doing that stuff? Does that make them any less of a man? And that really caught me in a sense that I wanted to support people like that, because I used to kind of believe you had to be those things, and it's not because I believe that because I was better. I believe that because we were trained that at an early age,
Right.
socially, we were trained that through marketing, through toys that we get as young children.
Disney.
Yeah, Disney, all this stuff. I mean, a lot of it is it's the social agreement that we have, this social indoctrination to being a man, at least in the United States. And it is, masculinity is it's a very differing style around the world. So we're talking about the US right now. So in the US,
Yeah.
that's kind of what we're focusing on. But ultimately, we are predisposed to all this stuff through what we're brought up to from ages 0 to 7, how we're influenced, right? So I thought that stuff. But then as I've come through self-development, I was like, wait a second, these guys aren't any less of a man than I am. They're just different. And what makes them any less of a man? Because they're not as good as I am at lifting weights?
Right.
No, he might not be as good as me at lifting weights, but he can talk circles around me on astrophysics.
Yeah.
So now I'm sitting here in a situation where I'm no longer, say for instance, I'm in a room of physicists.
Right.
I'm no longer the dominant party for what I
Right.
consider to be masculine. So now we look at it, and that's where the fluidity of masculinity comes into play too. So when I looked at that, I was like, man, how can I help these guys as well? And they're not any less of men. So let's go and support them, and let's show them that they can be supported, because in my opinion, these guys that keep promoting this old style of dominating
Right. I know.
masculinity, it's offensive to men, because the sense is you're telling other men that don't do that they're less of a man, that they're
Right.
not manning up. And it's like, no, man, some of these guys don't like fighting. Why does that make them less of a man? And who told you that fighting makes you a man?
Right. I
Some
think
of these,
creating peace, and creating, harmony in people's lives. And, males, we all have our own gifts. Like, I might not be the smartest in science, but I'm really good at talking to people, and I'm not afraid to randomly go up to people and tell them my story. Like,
yeah.
that's why I started this podcast, because I'm trying to get your story out there and people's messages. And a lot of males out there, they want to become these big figures, and they look up to these idols, but it's like, just start with who you are and build on top of that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And the problem that you're also seeing nowadays too is a lot of studies from Europe and the U.S. The male suicide rate is extremely high, and
Yeah.
part of that is because males can't step into their authenticity. And
Mm-hmm.
why is that? Well, we're not letting them. We're telling them what they have to be. They try to conform to that. They become depressed. They start drinking. They start doing drugs. They
Been
start doing
there.
exactly. They
Yeah.
start doing all these things, and if they don't get off that road, what do? A lot of them commit suicide,
Mm-hmm.
whether intentionally or by accident, but it happens. And so we're looking at this from a completely scientific perspective on suicide rates, and you're saying, well, how come men have this higher rate of suicide than women, when women are predisposed to be more emotional than men?
Right.
So it's the way that I look at it, and I'm not quoting any studies on this, but the way that I see it is the fact that we're suppressing a lot of our emotions because we were told we couldn't have them because it's not manly to have emotions.
Right.
So how do we get that out? We need to talk to men and say, it is okay. It's fine that you're not great at hunting. You don't have to be a hunter. It's fine that you're not great at sports. You don't have to play sports. Like, you
Right.
can be a man in your own way. The most important thing, though, is that you are confident. You walk into a room
Mm-hmm.
confident in who you are
Yep.
and what you're bringing to the table. And that's it. That is purely it, you
Right.
know?
I realized that 2 years ago when I got my second DUI. I was like, I'm done with this life. I'm done going out living on the weekends. I'm gonna start living on Mondays and starting my weeks off great and really exploring who I am. And I just started soul searching. I was like, I love people. I love talking. I
Mhm.
am so spontaneous. People tell me I'm pretty funny and relatable. I don't know if it's the beard. We talked about this in my last episode, and me and you.
Yeah.
But it's just like, you got to just like go out there and just make it happen for yourself and just tell people, go on social media, tell them what you love to do.
Yeah,
People will support you when you have a purpose bigger than yourself, and
absolutely.
they
And if you're
will.
And if you're just trying to bring others up, man, like that is the most beautiful thing out there because you know what?
Right.
There's no ego tied to that, and that's one of the coolest things that I think that I've picked up from it, self-development and what I see from, guys like you and a
Yeah.
lot of the guys I've had on the podcast is they've taken ego out of it and they're willing to help people regardless. And that's just a beautiful thing because at the end of the day, um, if you can just bring up one person from hanging a rope in their garage or from putting a gun in their mouth, if you can
Right.
take one person off that ledge or help them to stop doing drugs or help them to just look at themselves and respect themselves a little more, if you can help one person, like, bro, that's the end. That right there, that's it for me. I love that. Like, that's it. If I could just do that and I don't care if I'm big at all. If I can help people in that way, that's all I
Right.
care about.
It's
And that's,
about getting up every morning and feeling something and like really loving
yeah,
what you're doing, enjoying the process of it and being
yeah,
grateful for everything in your life. Cause I write my gratitude journal 3 times a day, what I'm grateful for.
yes. Love
Everybody
that.
calls me a girl for journaling, but I was like, you know what? That's masculine to me. I don't care. I love sharing my emotions and
Yeah.
being there for people. I'm an empath. I'm an ENFP. It's just who I am. And, you
Yeah.
know, I feel like you have to really embrace that.
Next time someone says that you're a girl for doing that or that you're
Yeah.
a pussy for doing that, ask them if they'd say that to Marcus Aurelius, who was a huge journaler.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
you wouldn't say that to some of these great heroes and these soldiers from past who actually took a lot of time journaling. It's one of the most therapeutic things that you can do, and it's really helpful to releasing your emotions in a way
Right.
that is very comfortable and in your own space.
Right.
So I love that you gratitude. I gratitude all the time. I have a joint with
I
a
know I can see you got like a goal list going on back there.
yeah, that's
The
the
next
why.
10 years.
Yeah, I got one over here, got a calendar here. I mean, there's our goal board over there. I mean, so it's beautiful to put that down. I have a journal with a gratitude journal with my wife that we
Yeah.
do every day.
That's
And
awesome.
it's a beautiful thing to do that and writing that out. So if I commend you for doing that and I
Thank you. I
100%
appreciate that.
support that, man.
Uh,
Absolutely.
Tell me a little bit about like how you're embracing your masculinity has helped you in your relationship for everybody out there who have relationships and are having a hard time being themselves. Because sometimes I feel like a lot of people in relationships, they lose their identity
Hmm.
and they forget to love themselves and like, oh, why can't we be like we were in the beginning? That or that question gets pulled up. Tell me how that's like really embraced your relationship with your wife.
Yeah, so I'm a firm believer in you can't measure everything towards the past. We're human beings, we evolve. We've done that through the beginning of time. You're going to do
Hmm.
that in your own lifetime. You're going to evolve. You're going to read things and change perspectives. You're going to become different physically. You're going to become different chemically. Like you're just going to change simply.
Right.
It's not about changing and measuring in the past. It's about changing together and continually looking to bring each other up. And that's what I've realized with my wife is the biggest thing as a man that I can do for her is hold space for her. And I've learned that us men, we
Yeah.
always want to fix stuff. Always want to fix it. We want a problem and a solution. That's just
Yep.
inherent. I mean, that's just inherent in us. With women, that's not it. Sometimes they just want to talk their emotions out and they don't need a solution. They don't need you to fix it. They just want you to hold that space for them. And I've learned with my wife from a relationship standpoint that the more I do that, the more connected we become, the more she
Right.
trusts me and the more she opens up to me. And that builds our relationship so much better. So a lot of times with masculinity, what I've done is the fact that I have to reserve myself sometimes in those conversations instead of trying to fix and be supportive. But at the end of the day, you never want to, like, you don't want to disown your masculinity. You still
Right.
want to hold it, because women in fact love your masculinity. They're, when you're in a um, heterosexual monogamous relationship,
Mm-hmm.
they love that about you. That is the opposite sex. That is what they're predisposed genetically to love. And so when you look at that, you need to just remember your masculinity is what got you where you are with her. And you need to take that and hold on to that every day. But you have to know when to compromise with it as well. So you have to understand that. And I would probably say that one of the biggest things you can ever do, and one of the best things you can ever do for a relationship, is study emotional intelligence.
Right.
Men are terrified of that because what's the
Yeah.
first word? Emotional, right?
Emotional. It's like we run like the wind.
Exactly. So when you start researching EQ, and you're able to implement that into your life, you not
Yeah.
only build a more confident masculine self, but you build a more respectful self to other people and to yourself, because you start to recognize your own emotions.
Right.
So that's been very helpful too.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a big thing. You were talking about emotional intelligence, EQ, and like I was always trying to connect with so many individuals throughout high school because I got bullied all the time because I wanted to connect emotionally and see how people would fit in my life, and I learned that really helped me in later in my life working in sales and just meeting people and this podcasting and networking and
Yeah.
growing a network, and I was like, maybe that's my gift, and I'm like, I was so afraid to be masculine growing up because I was bullied all the time, so I started learning that, my emotional connection and my intelligence was, something to really value
Hmm.
and learn from and embrace that. It's been a big thing. How is, you and your wife like building a business together? You both have like your own project. So it's like,
Yeah.
does that ever get in the way of like your daily habits?
Yeah, I would lie if I say no, but yeah. So some days our business platforms are conflicting because she's got work and I don't, or I'm doing work and she's not, and whatever. So there is a little bit of conflicting nature in that every once in a while. But ultimately, she's been a huge teacher of mine for it, because she started in the self-development world long before I did.
Mm-hmm.
But she's been a huge teacher in how to make sure I show up every day. And that's
Right.
probably one of the biggest things that you can do, is realizing how you want to show up, because you never want to give the people who are listening, you never want to give the followers or your community a watered down version of yourself. And
Yeah.
if you can't bring that 100% for them, then maybe that's a day that you take down, and there's no shame in that. That's a day that you settle down, you say, I'm just not in it. I've had those days. I don't show up sometimes on those days because I don't want to bring any type of negativity to, the community. And so
Right.
when that happens, you have to realize that. But building a business together, it's really influential to watch her, because we really do play off each other. You mentioned before we got on the podcast that you've seen us with the Harders, and
Oh yeah.
you've seen us with a few other self-development people. And one of the things that we do with each other is we support each other in those efforts. So when
Yeah.
she's doing something and she needs that support, I give her 100% of my support. I tell her that, I follow her, I help her to build her platform around whatever she's doing. For instance, like when she is, like she was doing a Women's Day speech a few weeks ago,
Right.
she was running by me the content for that and listening to that and being honest with her. Well, babe, that's not great. You probably need to change this or change that, or maybe you should focus on this a little more. And then she takes that and it helps her build a better content for the audience, and vice versa. She goes, babe, that she'll give me
Right.
she's out there listening probably right now. She'll be like, babe, you shouldn't have said that, or like this was good, but maybe you can
Yeah.
work here. So helping each other in that way has been really cool. And it's probably one of the coolest things that you can do. But you got to remember that, you know, there's a separation between the business part and the relationship part, in my opinion.
Right.
You can't let those merge, because then you just become a business and you could lose that relationship value that you guys have. And then
Mm-hmm.
you become working partners, and you don't
Right.
want to have that in the relationship, right? You want to keep that separate. So that's what we work on that as well.
Yeah, it's been an amazing journey, following you guys on Instagram. You guys really inspired me. And what's more of your plans with your podcast? Like, what's your goals for it, and putting more guests on, or where you're heading with it more now?
Yeah, man. So my podcast, I have really fallen in love with. I've just gotten some great people on the show. As you've seen some of the guests,
Yeah.
my whole point with the podcast is to bring awareness to that small percentage of true alpha males, not like fake alpha males, but I mean, I guess those guys are going to listen too because they're going to respect the background. But I
Right.
truly want to help all males, but the alpha males are the ones that are really hard to get into it. So ultimately, my plan for the podcast is to continue to get self-development guests and continue to bring on special operations guys. I have a ton of friends in the community who are
That's
more than
awesome.
share their stories. A lot of them get pretty vulnerable on the show, which I really respect from them. And I think that helps other guys realize that they can lower their walls and shut down their ego and be open about who they truly are. So the goal is to continue to bring those guys on and then keep doing research on masculinity because I'm very much about a strong foundation. If
Right.
you don't know the foundation of something, you can't be good at it. And that's what I've learned through a lot of my training is you have to build the fundamentals. If you don't build the fundamentals, you're basically building a house of cards that's going to fall eventually.
Right.
So that strong foundation is now, in my opinion, for masculinity, it resides in the science that's behind it, which is actually relatively new since about the late 70s, early 80s. It's not that old. Um, so masculinity is really on the precipice right now of getting research and statistics behind it and studies in social settings behind it. So my intent is to really build that up for men to
Yeah.
understand that foundation so then they can go out and do the work themselves on themselves and they can say, okay, I understand this now, why I'm doing this. Let me figure out how to address this in myself.
Okay. I see what you're saying. Can't make a horse drink, lead him to the water, though. That's
Yeah, man. Absolutely.
That's really awesome. Yeah, because like I'm currently this podcast. It's been like a big journey. I'm kind of like just interviewing people, just inspire them through stories, and I'm trying to work on a business right now. What is your advice for any kind of like entrepreneurs or influencers out there that want to grow their mission and their vision?
Oh man, I would think the best thing I can tell them is what I told you early on when we were DMing on IG, and that is find what you're trying to be what your message is going to be, and stick with it. Times will not be easy. I heard from Josh Trent the other day when I was talking with him that the first 2 years of his podcast were very hard.
Right.
And that if that's coming from a guy who's one of the biggest podcasters out right now,
Yeah.
it is going to happen to all of us. You are going to have trying times. You are going to have times that you're going to be like, is this worth it? I'm going
Yeah.
to quit. Like, this sucks. I'm just going to go do my normal job, be comfortable, and that's it. You're going to have those days, man. I'm
Yeah.
sorry to tell you, I have those days. I still have those days. But the thing is, stick with your message and make that when you find that why,
Yeah.
just stick with it, because guess what? The people who make it big sometimes aren't the greatest at what they're doing. They just stuck it out and everybody else fell off. So if you stick with whatever you're doing as an entrepreneur, as a social media influencer, continue to stick with it. Do the work, put in, show up, and it will bear the fruit that you want it to. You just have to give it time.
Right. I think the big thing is just like being yourself and being true to you. And I know everybody's out there. We look up to like Gary Vee and all these idols. We want to, it's nice, to look up to these people as like an influence. But I think you just really got to write down what you really want. Like really write. It's kind of like a business proposal. Really write down for your business. Write down for your podcast what kind of content you want to put out there. Like yours is masculinity. You're, oh, embracing that and putting that awareness out there. And I think that's really awesome, man. What you're doing. Um, what any future projects you working on coming up or?
Yeah, right now the next step is to start a YouTube channel, and the YouTube channel is going to
Oh,
have it'll probably intermingle some podcasts with some other content that I'm going to start putting together, like some short videos and stuff. So it's going to be a mix between that. That's going to be coming in the near future for me, and then continually to follow the podcast. I'm really just doubling down on kind of building myself to spread the awareness of masculinity. So ultimately, as far as like coaching and stuff like that, I haven't really looked into that as like a business venture, but really just trying to settle down and influence people through media outlets.
have you found any mentors at all in your life recently? People you've networked with have really helped coach you in any way?
Yeah, man, there's some great ones out there. I think one of the ones that I really, really fell in love with was Stefandos. He is freaking awesome,
Okay.
and he
I'll have to
does.
check him out.
Oh man, he is an awesome dude. He builds his coaching platform around masculinity, but also embracing femininity and embracing the feminine partners in your life.
Yeah.
Um, respecting yourself, respecting your relationship. So if I can give a shout out to him, like that is somebody I think everybody needs to follow and support, because that guy, I had him on the podcast recently. That'll be out in a
Yeah, I
couple.
do. I think you didn't post that one yet, did you?
Not yet. That'll
Not
be out
yet.
in a
Okay.
couple weeks, but it
Okay.
was probably one of the coolest podcasts. And he's another brilliant guy. So, as a mentor, he is an actual coach, and his love for other men and his love for helping men is
Right.
just one of the coolest things I've ever seen. He's just super authentic. And then another one is Chris Harder, man. Chris Harder,
Yeah.
that guy is a
It's cool.
genuine dude, and just down to earth. Like, he doesn't have any like chip on his shoulder. That guy has, basically demolished his ego and is 100% supportive. So I would say that is another person to look up to as a mentor, because he and his wife Lori are
Yeah.
beautiful to follow, and they've done similar stuff. They've built their two businesses, kind of pillaring one another, and then they also kind of intermingle as well. So it's really cool to watch that. They're very inspiring as well. So
Yeah, that's really awesome. 'Cause I saw you guys. I met them because Lori Harder's doing that Bliss Project. She had her book that came out. She was on School of Greatness podcast. I remember I watched that episode. That was a really good
yeah,
episode. Her
yeah,
story.
yeah.
Yeah. Where else can everybody find you on social media and like all your websites? Because you're working on so many things, man. You're busy
Yeah,
guy.
I get home from work and then it's just work again. So it's fun work. This stuff I love doing. So it's actually more inspiring to do it. But yeah, man. So you can find me at Johnny.Elsasser on IG. And that's Elsasser's Elsasser. The Art of Masculinity podcast is where you can listen to the content that I'm putting out right now. And then you can find me at the Art of Masculinity on Facebook. And then
Hmm.
for men that want to build a community and kind of jump in, I have the Masculinity Corner that's pretty fresh and new that I'm trying to get more men involved in, to create
Yeah.
a community of men to just kind of talk. And if anybody has issues that they want to bring up or has content they want me to address, that's a great place for me to get that from men. So you guys can join up over there. But that's right now. And then you can find me at johnny.elsasser. Or johnnyelsasser.com. Sorry, johnnyelsasser.com. That's the website. And
Hmm.
that'll link you up to Instagram and the podcast and everything else.
Yeah, I really love your webpage, dude. It's really awesome the work you've put in, and I think this mission and putting awareness out and having males embrace their masculinity is a big thing. And now today's with depression and on the rise of social media, it's been a big thing, man. You're doing amazing things, you and your wife, and you guys are a huge inspiration. This is a question I ask people in my podcast. So, what
Yeah.
is the legacy you want to leave behind?
Oh man. Oh, I've never been asked that one. The legacy that I would love to leave behind is just that I was authentic in who I was, and I helped men become who they truly want to be. That's if I can end the rest of my days that way, and that's how people remember me. That is probably the most beautiful thing I can think of. I'm not vain to want to really leave too much of a legacy, other in the sense that helping others is truly a passion of mine now, and men just need to be confident in who they are.
Right. And you're doing a big thing, man. I love it. And
Thanks,
I look
brother.
forward to collaborating with you more and really just,
Absolutely.
learning from you. You've really taught me a lot about podcasting, and you and your wife, especially, and branding and
Yeah.
learning. It's a lot of work. It's not easy editing and, and just networking, and then just trying to grow this mission on my podcast and really inspire people through my stories. So this podcast really started with my dad. He told me 2 years ago, he's like, "What do you want to do? What's your gift to the world?" I said, "I want to inspire people." And he's like, "Go out and do it." So that's why I started this podcast,
I
so.
love that. That's awesome, bro. I love that. And that's cool that he supported that and pushed you in that direction, because yeah, embrace who you are, man. And you seem to really enjoy this and you seem really good at it. So absolutely.
Yeah, because I feel like I'm not in such a hurry. I'm just kind of like just embracing like getting up every day and just like, yeah, man, I get to talk to Johnny today. I'm excited. Can't wait till 8 o'clock, do this
Yeah.
podcast. And it's just awesome, man. So,
Yeah. Living
and
presently. That's probably one of the most beautiful things you can do. Because at the end of the day, you can't turn back around and say, well, I'm going to go take a rewind button here. This is it. This is all you got. So,
right.
make that end statement goal, and then live through your present life and enjoy that. Even the days that suck, there's something to learn from that.
Right.
So,
It's been a big journey for me in this personal and professional development, every
that's
day. And
cool.
so, but thank you so much for coming on Creating Impact today, man, and sharing your mission, your story, and supporting your wife's mission too as well. So I look forward to hearing more content from you guys and your episodes and your guests that you have on. So
Absolutely, brother. Thank you so much for having me on, Scott.
you too. Thank you.